Tonight's talk is about discipline. And the title of the talk is How Discipline Brings Freedom, and how a structured way of living is really the source of what I call true happiness here. True happiness equals freedom. And of course, I'll explain using the Buddhist context, Buddhist theory and philosophy to discuss these topics. So I don't know you folks well. I don't know your background in Buddhism, but I think it's important to start this talk by pointing out that the three main practices of Buddhism, what's called the Sanxue, the first is actually discipline, sometimes translated as precepts. Excuse me. The Chinese is 戒定慧. It's usually translated as precepts, samadhi or concentration, and wisdom. But I like to use the word discipline because it's broader than the word precepts. And I'll explain further. But we can say that discipline is one of the three major practices of Buddhism, the three aspects of a more complete Buddhist practice. If you're new to Buddhism, or if you usually just focus on one of these three, some people like to study the Dharma and have spend more time learning the theory. Some people like to spend more time meditating. Others, which I think is fewer people, focused on just the discipline aspect. But I think most popular is meditation and study of theory, Buddhist teachings. So I don't know how you folks feel about this topic, discipline. I mean, I guess you're interested because you showed up, but I don't think discipline is a popular topic among lay Buddhists. And I say that because the teachings on discipline, which include precepts, are really very limited in terms of practice for laypersons. If we were monastics, we could spend years, we could spend a lifetime learning discipline because the monastic code contains so much detail, so many finer kinds of behavioral practices. So that's why in Chinese Buddhism, if you don't know this, there's a school of Buddhism that focuses on discipline. It's called the Lü Zong, 戒律的律. It just literally means the discipline school. So for lay people, there's not much to study. It's not so popular. Probably what we see most in Buddhism in Western countries is about meditation and theory. But within Chinese Buddhism, which is where Chan Buddhism developed from, within Chinese Buddhism, we have not only the Chan school, which later became Zen in Japan, but there are many other schools. One of the most popular within Chinese Buddhism is some people see it as a school, but it's the method of reciting the Buddha's name and all of the practices that are related to what's called Pure Land teachings or the Pure Land method. Chinese is 净土法门. This is a huge part of Chinese Buddhism, and it could be even more popular than the Chan school these days because it's so simple. Just reciting the Buddha's name and knowing a little bit about these ideas of Pure Land practice. The Pure Land method also emphasizes sitting meditation, but not too much. It's more of just an emphasis on reciting the Buddha's name to be reborn in a future Pure Land. This is probably the most widespread teaching in Chinese Buddhism. There are other schools in Chinese Buddhism that focus on The teachings, um, the Tiantai school, the Huayan school, focus more on theory. But in Western Buddhism, again, there's very little on discipline. However, I don't know if you folks are familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh, who was one of the most well-known Buddhist teachers of our time. He actually did something very unique with the teachings on discipline. He created what's called the 14 mindfulness trainings. I don't know if you've heard of that. He basically used the word mindfulness in place of discipline. Maybe because discipline doesn't sound very inviting, and there may be a lot of other connotations of what discipline means. But he called discipline the practice of mindfulness trainings. Um, 14 trainings for lay practitioners to apply to their lives and to have um, a clear guide on daily life practice. So that's something you may be interested in looking into after this talk. So although discipline is not so popular among Western lay Buddhists, it is still one of the three most important practices of Buddhism. And it's said that without the practice of discipline, the other two practices have no foundation. Meaning, if we want to have wisdom, I think wisdom is probably the most attractive one, right? Teachings on wisdom, um, teachings on suffering as well as enlightenment, teachings on um, freedom, as well as teachings on the theoretical side of emptiness and what that means. A lot of these teachings can be very attractive, and we can learn about them, think about them. But really, if we don't have a stable mind, and if we don't have a foundation of very solid concentration, the wisdom that we gain is going to be very superficial, meaning it's most likely just going to be knowledge. It's not going to be an actual insight because just all these concepts without a foundation of concentration, the mind is too scattered to really experience clearly, or the mind is too clouded by thoughts and emotion to even be able to observe the nature of things as they are. So without concentration, wisdom is not possible. Um, and if someone says they have wisdom, but they haven't established a stable mind, that's often that's described as crazy wisdom. A person who's very sharp intellectually, but they don't have mental stability. So their behavior can be very erratic and they can get into a lot of trouble. It's not really wisdom. It's more just crazy, actually. You just leave the word wisdom out. Intelligent, but unstable, that won't lead to wisdom. And to have concentration, even if we spend a lot of time meditating, or we place a lot of importance on meditation, if we don't have discipline in our daily life, meaning if we don't live our daily life in a structured way, or at least a way that's healthy, and our behavior, if our behavior is not healthy, um, just some examples are even if we don't sleep well, if we don't have a good regular sleep schedule, we don't have a good diet, and if we add on top of that overworking, and if we add on top of that, say we like to party, we like to socialize, and maybe we like to drink alcohol or use other substances as well. If our lifestyle is like that and we meditate very diligently, it's like, what kind of concentration do you think we can develop with a mind that's been disturbed by all of this irregular activity, especially intoxicants and just um, um, kind of unstable behavior. So discipline becomes then the foundation for both, excuse me, for both concentration and wisdom. Discipline, just to talk about it in simple terms, discipline is the most concrete of these two practices. Wisdom is very theoretical, can be hard to grasp unless we have a really solid intellectual structure of the Buddha's teachings. Concentration, again, can be difficult. It can be even difficult to describe the methods of practice because it's all this internal states of mind. Um, Talking about how we use our attention, how to focus, how to observe. It's very abstract. Discipline is the most concrete because it's talking about behavior. It talks about what we should do or shouldn't do if we're interested in experiencing freedom, if we're interested in experiencing freedom from suffering. So discipline includes just behavior of body, speech, and also mind, but with more of an emphasis on body and speech. So how many of you have actually studied a bit about Buddhist precepts? Show of hands for anyone who's some. Okay. Um, the Buddhist precepts, there are different categories, but briefly, we have the five precepts, which are for lay people, as well as monastics. But for lay people, there are really five precepts as the basic foundation. And I'm sure if you've heard this before, these five precepts are common throughout many other religions and even common law. Not to kill, steal, have sexual misconduct, um, not to lie, and uniquely not to take intoxicants, which includes alcohol and any other kind of drug which is made intentionally to just distort our perception. Now, when people hear those first four, they're like, okay, I can deal with the first four. But the fifth, no intoxicants, meaning not even drinking alcohol, some people may immediately kind of turn off and be like, okay, so maybe Buddhism is not for me, at least not the precept part. You don't have to worry because within Buddhism, there's also flexibility. So people who feel that it's very difficult to abstain from alcohol or intoxicants, they can choose not to uphold that precept. This may be due to work or social uh, reasons for socializing or being able to do business, um, maybe some other reasons, but it's okay not to take that precept. Technically, it's also okay to not only take one precept if we feel that taking all of them or the other four are too difficult for us. There are those five precepts. There are also what's called the Bodhisattva precepts. Have you folks heard of that? These are the guidelines for people who want to go a step further in their practice to not only abstain from doing these harmful things, but the Bodhisattva precepts include practices for doing things that are wholesome, encouraging us to live in a way um, which supports well-being, which supports minimizing suffering for ourselves and others. So I won't go into the details of the Bodhisattva precepts, but they're designed for um, deepening our practice as well as deepening our intention for practice, where it's not only for ourselves that we're practicing, but we're doing it for all people, for all beings. This compassionate mindset is important in the Bodhisattva precepts. And then, of course, we have monastic precepts. Um, the monastic precepts, there are hundreds actually, 200 or 40 something for the monks, even more for the nuns, which is actually a controversial thing. Why do the nuns have more precepts? Won't get into that today, but that's another large topic of research and discussion. The different needs of male practitioners and female practitioners from the Buddha's time. These precepts, can lay people study them? Well, we can, but since we're not monastics, and the way I see it, since we're not monastics from 2,500 years ago, during the Buddha's time, there isn't too much benefit to studying the monastic precepts. Although, just reading them and getting a basic understanding can help you know how better to interact with Buddhist monastics. A lot of the Buddhist etiquette uh, is based on the monastic guidelines. So that could be helpful for you if you are a member of a Buddhist community, you are close to monastics, and you want to be able to support their practice. It can be useful to learn a bit about monastic precepts. There's a way to talk about precepts which describes them as the Chinese is 别解脱. Sometimes it's 别解脱戒, but the original phrase is 别解脱, which means particular liberation or freedom from particular things. Um, what that means is if we can follow one precept, we have freedom from the suffering that not following that precept brings. So, for example, if it's the precept of stealing or abstaining from stealing, if we steal and we keep stealing, whether it's something small or something large, in our mind, there's craving, and we're feeding craving the more we steal, right? If we abstain from stealing, we liberate ourselves from craving of that thing. And we liberate ourselves from craving a little bit more, uh, or we reduce our craving a little bit more just by following that one precept. Of course, it doesn't mean it eliminates all craving altogether, but that particular precept allows us to be free from that particular vexation or that particular kind of suffering. So I won't get into any more detail about these categories of precepts today, but we can know that in general, precepts are specific guidelines for very specific behavior that helps us relieve us from the suffering that comes from engaging in that behavior. If we don't steal, we're that much freer from craving. If we don't kill or even use hurtful speech, we're that much freer from anger, the anger that's driving this harmful behavior. And if you're interested in looking at how to broaden the practice of precepts from these very specific guidelines to uh, every activity of daily life, there's a wonderful teaching that comes from uh, the flower adornment scripture. Chinese is Huayan Jing, or Huayan Sutra. I think it's called flower adornment. And there's a chapter on pure practices, the Jingxing Ping. And this chapter on pure practices is a way to develop the mind of compassion in every activity of daily life. with a reminder. There's all these reminders for developing compassion in this chapter. And uh, there was I forget the teacher's name, a monastic in the Chinese Buddhist tradition who took the principle of this chapter of the Flower Adornment Sutra and made a booklet for beginning monastics. It's usually called um, The Essentials of Daily Vinaya. Vinaya, I can type that here. Vinaya is the word that's used for the complete study of precepts and discipline. Um, Essentials of Daily Vinaya. And so in this little book, there are many, many phrases. And one example would be um, something like, washing my hands, I wash the impurity from my hands and my mind, and may all sentient beings be free from the impurity of suffering, right? And something for sweeping the floor. As I sweep the floor clean of dust, I sweep the dust of attachments from my mind. May all living beings be free from such attachments, right? Lots of phrases like that to remind us that every activity of daily life we can do with a mindset of compassion and with discipline. Combined together, it really is strengthening the practice of mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. But it's more emphasis on discipline, just engaging in daily life tasks with mindfulness and this compassionate intent. So if you're interested in that, you can look that up. I believe there's an English translation. I think Thich Nhat Hanh may have an English translation um, of that, something like the Little Book of Zen, I believe. Later on in Buddhist history, there was a very well-known monk called Master Baizhang. I don't know if you've heard of this great monk, Master Baizhang Huaihai. And Master Baizhang he was very well known for his wisdom, and there are stories in the Chan records of him and his students, as well as a very famous story of when he was giving a Dharma talk and an old man showed up and asked him a question about karma. I won't tell the story here because it's quite long, but he's often quoted for that story. But Master Baizhang's made a huge contribution to monastic Buddhism as well as the practice of discipline in general by creating what was eventually called the Baizhang Qinggui, or the pure practices or guidelines of purity by Master Baizhang, which were guidelines for the monastics on how to live their daily life from morning till evening. Not only how to wash your hands, how to use the toilet, how to work in the fields with a mindset of practice, but it also includes the structure for an enormous monastic complex with up to thousands, a couple of thousand of people used to live at these monastic complexes. So, you had to organize everyone. You had to have structure in this kind of setting. Otherwise, imagine if you just have like 2,000 people who show up and they say, "Hey, I want to practice Buddhism. I want to be a monastic. I want to be liberated." And you just throw them in a monastery and say, "Okay, well, we'll meditate, just meditate, and we'll have a Dharma talk at night." That would be chaos. Just the amount of people and all the needs needing to have food. Imagine the toilet. You have to have a really seriously well-designed toilet at a monastery for thousands of people, right? So all of this infrastructure, and the internal structure of everyone's roles, the from the lead figure of the monastery who guides the whole direction of practice, to the treasurer, to the person who works the kitchen, to the person who organizes the uh, wood collection. Again, thousands of people that need to eat every day. Think of a winter and how much wood is used. So this is a huge operation. So Master Baizhang's daily guidelines were a huge contribution, which were basically the a more modern expression of the Buddha's teachings in daily life. Structure to create a healthy lifestyle, an organized community of people, um, and to support a healthy body and mind, which could then engage in meditation and study of the Dharma. Fast forward another few hundred or maybe over 1,000 years. I can't remember the dates of Master Baizhang, but our founder, Master Shengyan, also created a set of rules for the monastics at Dharma Mountain. When I was a monk, they had a book which was fairly thick, many pages on the rules of and guidelines of how to take a meal, how to wear your robes, how to do chores, or the procedure of doing chores and cleaning up, even, you know, much more modernized version of how do you eat when you're on the road? Monastics are very busy, so not all of them just get to, eat in the dining hall very calmly and peacefully and have food served by the food servers. Some of them may be on the road. They're giving a Dharma talk at a faraway place, so they have to drive back, or someone drives them back, and they're hungry, so you eat in the car. So there were guidelines on how to eat in the car if you have to eat on the road, things like that. Um, so this information is probably not available to the public and won't be. It's just for the monastics of Dharma Drum Mountain, but I see it as a kind of Dharma treasure because it presents such a wonderful structured way of living for modern monastics, which then brings us to now lay people. Us lay people, how do we practice in accordance with the Buddha's teaching in a disciplined and structured way? From what I've seen so far of what's available to um, Western Buddhists, or let's just say English-speaking Buddhists, there really isn't much on the practice of discipline. Um, Again, Thich Nhat Hanh has a few books. He even revised the monastic precepts and has a book that's available to the public if you're interested in that. But for lay people, there's really not much. And I believe the most complete and thoughtful presentation of discipline for lay people is what I mentioned before, Thich Nhat Hanh's 14 mindfulness trainings, which includes things like how do we use social media? How do we use technology in a way which supports a life of um, purity, or at least the direction of mental purity, meaning a mind that's freer from distracting thoughts and turbulent emotions and more calm and clear. There's not much guidance on how to structure our lives. So I wanted to spend more time with today's talk on this part, disciplined living for us lay folks. I don't think we have any monastics in attendance today. I like to use the term personal precepts. when talking about a personalized approach to discipline. Discipline, um, again, we have the five precepts, we have the Bodhisattva precepts. Those are general guidelines on how to be basically a healthy, kind human being. But I think we need much more than that to know how to have a healthy life, and that supports concentration. And that's the foundation of concentration and wisdom. So I haven't written anything down in terms of creating some literature on structured living for lay people, but I'm thinking about it. Most most of what I find is valuable with discipline is what I share with people when I do coaching, either life coaching or mental health counseling, where a lot of people who are coming to counseling or coaching, they're struggling in their life, they're suffering a lot, and it's often the case that their lifestyle is quite unstable, or there's a lot of imbalance in the way they live. So some examples are just our schedule, our week to week schedule. Is there any structure to that? And some people may think, um, well, I don't want too much structure. And some people say, I don't need structure. I just do what I have to do, and when it's done, I'm done. I don't need to make a plan about it. It's too much trouble. And I agree that for some people, too much structure is really a burden and it's not helpful. But in my experience, most, if not all people, can benefit from at least a basic structure to their week. It could be it could be a daily structure, but I think a weekly structure is better in that it allows for differences from day to day. So with disciplined daily life, we can first look at our daily and weekly schedule. What does our sleep schedule look like? What does our work schedule look like? Do we exercise? That's not talked about much in in Buddhist teachings, which I find that kind of strange. Um, Maybe because a lot of the teachings coming from the monastic tradition, even back during the Buddha's time, people were getting a lot of activity, even the monastics. They had to walk every day into town to beg for food. And the monastics in the Chan and Zen traditions, they were doing their own farming. Nobody was bringing them food. So most of the day was activity, farming. Nowadays, a lot of us, our day-to-day work is like in front of the computer at a desk. So I think exercise is something that's ignored among the Buddhist communities and teachings, because if we don't have balance within our body, and our body is very weak and sickly and even emaciated from not only sitting at our computer, but then just going to sit and meditate for a few hours. And then our vacation is spent at meditation retreats where we sit for 10 days in a row without moving much. You know, our body, the health of our body, if it's not good, that's not going to support concentration or wisdom, especially people who like to do concentration practices which require more energy. Samadhi practices, deep absorption, require a certain kind of energy to be able to maintain them. Um, so, how do we take care of our body? Do we even exercise or are we active enough? What about leisure? What about our leisure activities? Do we have any? In the Buddha's teachings, of course, when a lot of the talk is about leaving behind desire, and a lot of the sutras are directed towards monastics, there's really not going to be any talk about leisure because any extra time apart from responsibility is going to be spent meditating, reflecting on the teachings, sharing the Buddha's teachings, or having discussions. You're not going to hear about, the Buddha saying, monks and nuns, you must go enjoy yourself and just have a walk in the park, once a week or something like that. But again, if we look at the structure of their lives, monastic life includes a lot of healthy but enjoyable things like walking leisurely. Walking meditation is actually quite leisurely walking. And if you're walking outdoors in nature, this is a very healthy kind of experience for the body and mind. So we can consider for ourselves, do we have a balance of leisure in our lives? Or are we a little bit um, too stringent or too strict on ourselves? And so that we only work and maybe we exercise, but that's a project. So we work, we exercise, we take care of our family responsibilities, and any leftover time, it's just got to be study or meditation. It's no time for leisure, no time for socializing. Is that really healthy? Is that really balanced for a layperson not to have a healthy social life and meet with friends or have leisure time to not think about anything and just enjoy the outdoors or enjoy healthy activities that help us to relax and de-stress from very stressful work and family life? I include this all in discipline. It may not sound like discipline to have leisure, but I see it as helping us to balance our life. So sleep, diet, exercise, work, leisure, social, social life. If we can balance all of these different activities, this is forming a very good foundation for a calm and stable mind, which again, of course, is the foundation for wisdom. So this is more of a general structure, right, of our week. And we can practice this by making a plan for ourselves, setting aside time to sit down and construct a structure for our week that we think is balanced. It may not be perfect the first time we draft it. It may need adjustment, but to really make it a practice, planning a structure. And again, it doesn't have to be like every single hour of the day we have to know exactly what we're doing. It doesn't have to be that detailed, but to block times where we have these certain activities, work, meal times, exercise, family time, leisure time. Having general blocks of time can help us have this very stable and healthy structure in daily life. But that's not enough. I think we also need more clear behavioral guidelines for ourselves. For example, um, this thing, phones, computers, what's our behavior like? How do we use these devices? And does it consume us and consume a lot of our time? And does it often, because of what we're consuming and the time we spend on these devices, what is it doing to our state of mind? I myself, I think I probably use the phone too much. I could use it less. Um, can we create a guideline for ourselves on how much to use the phone or other devices and what content are we consuming? If we say, "Oh, well, I just know what's good to watch and what's not good to watch, so I'll watch the good stuff and not the bad stuff." Okay, maybe some of us have that ability to discern very clearly and choose our behavior wisely. But I think a lot of the time we may need a clear guideline of, from this time to this time, I'll use my phone, or I'll just give myself half an hour a day to use the phone. Some people also find that a guideline of I'll only use the phone if I know what I'm going to use it for, right? I'm only going to pick up the phone if I know I want to search for something. If I have something in mind that I want to search for, or if I have something in mind that I want to watch, maybe you have a YouTube channel that you like and you like to keep updated on it. So that's your thing. You can check in with that YouTube channel every day, which is fine. That's very clear and that's very intentional. But if we just pick up the phone and we're like, we don't think about at all what we want to watch, we have no intention, we just pick it up and we start scrolling, that's when we get lost because there's no clear intention and there's no clear limit on the time or the content. So quite a few people that I'm working with, that's part of their personal precepts, these specific guidelines on how to use their phone, um, or it could be other things. It could also be some people, um, they're not Buddhists, um, and they drink alcohol or they use other substances, and they need to create a clear guideline for how much alcohol do they think is okay to consume before it becomes a problem, before it starts to interfere with their judgment in their life. We can also have other guidelines which can be focused more on how we communicate with the people that are closest to us. So for those of you who live with someone, if you're married or you just live with a life partner or roommates, um, how do we engage with them? Do we pay attention to how we speak, how we talk to them? It's interesting. I don't know what your experience is, but from my experience, it seems that with the people that are, when I engage with the people that are closest to me, I can be the nastiest, right? I can be the least thoughtful, the least mindful, because we're just with each other every day and they can take a hit and they could take a punch, so to speak. So I don't know. I see a few of you laughing. Maybe it is true that we're less mindful with the people we're closest with, especially when we're most comfortable and most relaxed, but relaxed in a way where we're inattentive. We can say things and do things which are pretty harmful. And these harmful ways of speaking can accumulate. Just for example, I don't know, if we're tired of seeing our partner do something every day, we may just say something like, why are you such a mess? Why do you always do that? You're such a this and that. And just a critical word may just like come out of our mouth like nothing. And maybe they don't seem too fazed by it. They just maybe poke back. They're like, well, look at you. You're this and that and this and that. The typical arguing couple or arguing siblings, right? But doesn't that do a little bit of harm? And each time we do that, don't we add a little bit more negativity? And the impression that we leave in our loved one's mind is a negative one, a harmful one. Those little things accumulate. So over the years, maybe that's why some couples or some siblings just get nastier and nastier as the years go on, because all of that is just accumulated. Compared to couples or family members that grow more maturely, and have more wholesome interactions as the years go on, that actually has to be cultivated. So part of our personal precepts or personal discipline can be with speech, so that we have an intention in our mind to once a day say something thoughtful about our loved one. Not just something random and meaningless, but something that really um, that we sincerely believe in, something that we experience about the person. So let's say they they support us in a certain way, and we appreciate their support, but maybe we just don't say it. It's kind of just we take it for granted. We can have a practice of once a day telling our loved one, you know, honey, I really appreciate your support with my project. Or, you know, son, I really appreciate, all the help you've been giving around the house or whatever, right? Um, Having that as a practice to once a day say something to these people or to that person. This way, day by day, we're planting more wholesome seeds and we're watering those wholesome seeds so that over the years, our relationships develop and become more wholesome rather than a relationship just becoming more and more negative without us even noticing it. How many relationships do we have where we really love the person, but we've just fallen into this habit of speaking very negatively? Um, I knew this couple who they were both Buddhist practitioners and they were, practicing for 20 or 30 years and they study a lot, so they know a lot of Buddhist teachings. They meditate a lot, but they both had a little bit of a nasty habit towards each other. So they'd argue and they'd poke fun at each other, but they'd use Buddhist terminology to do that. So it was, kind of nasty, but at the same time funny, at the same time using Buddhism as a way to, um, poke fun at each other. And, at first it didn't seem like much when I saw it, but after reflection, that kind of behavior, which is half joking, half being nasty, and using Buddha Dharma as the content of the jokes, what does that do to the relationship? Number one, there's just this negative back and forth. What does it do to the quality of our state of mind? Does it lead more to a calmness, a concentrated state? Definitely not. And what does it do to our view of Buddhism? We're using the Buddha's teachings just as a joke. It tends to be less of a serious matter then, right? It's easy to then not take the teachings seriously and almost use them more as jokes than guidelines for helping us to reduce our suffering. So as Buddhists, we can all fall into bad habits with the way we speak to each other. And there are no precepts for lay people, that are that much detail, that give that much detailed guidance. So we can have our own personal precepts for how to speak with each other and how to develop more wholesome, loving speech. Just briefly, even our environment, what does our environment look like? Part of a structured and healthy way of living includes a structured environment. If our environment is a mess, what's the quality of our mind going to be like? If our environment is clean, doesn't that support a feeling of being calm because the space is clear? Some people could argue that and they say, well, I don't mind mess, so my mind is calm even if there's stuff everywhere. I don't mind. But then what if you have to find something? Can you find it if there's just piles of stuff? Or could that lead to an agitated mind because we need something and we can't find it? Someone could argue, well, I just know where my stuff is. That's over in that pile. This thing is over in that pile. But then we could say, when you use things and when you're finished using something, what do we do with it? Do we just throw it? and so it ends up in a pile, or we just toss it on a desk. We don't even think twice about it. Is that conducive to mindfulness and concentration? And I don't think that can be argued. If when we use things, we may know where we got it from, or we know where we toss it, but where is our mind when we're throwing that thing? Has our mind already jumped to the next topic or the next thought? Compared to if we have a clean and tidy environment and everything has a home, every object has a space where it lives. Then when we're finished with something, we bring it back to its home. We put it in its place. And if we do that mindfully, that leads to a more mindful state of being, which then leads to a more stable um, and stronger level of concentration. So this discipline and structure can apply to our environment. And then we can look at just mindfulness in general. What is mindfulness? Mindfulness is being aware of our body, speech, and mind in every moment, in the present moment. So with lay practice, there's no specific guidelines on how to be mindful in daily life. We can just say, oh, just be mindful, which isn't very clear. And if we tell ourselves, oh, yeah, I'll do that, I'll just do my meditation, and then during the day, I'm just going to be mindful. Does that really work for us? Maybe it works for some people who already have a very stable and clear state of body and mind, so they can just naturally be mindful throughout the whole day. In my experience, most of us need some reminders and specific guidelines on how and when to be mindful. So, for example, it can be a great practice to first choose specific activities as our mindfulness in daily life practice. We could choose brushing our teeth. So every day we know that when it's time to brush our teeth, this is uh, a chance to practice mindfulness. So instead of brushing our teeth and kind of walking around the house and talking to people and trying to get things done, moving this here, moving that there as we're brushing, especially if you have like one of those automated toothbrushes, you just kind of stick it in your mouth and it does most of the work for you. So you have all this bandwidth to do other things. This one woman who I was working with, she said, yeah, that's what I do. I don't stay put when I'm brushing my teeth. I try to get things done. Um, we said, okay, well, how is that affecting your state of mind? She thought about it. She's like, yeah, maybe I should try brushing mindfully. So we made it into a practice of just standing there in the bathroom, either in front of the mirror or she said actually looking in the mirror was distracting. So she wouldn't look in the mirror, but she would just stand in the bathroom and brush her teeth and be aware of how she was brushing, the areas of her mouth she was brushing, making sure to get every spot, and made it into a thing, made it into a particular practice that she knew she was going to do every day and where she was very intentional. I'm going to be mindful now that I'm brushing my teeth. This is a great way to develop mindfulness in daily life by choosing activities, maybe choosing one first, and then gradually adding a second, and then a third, and then a fourth, until eventually our whole day and all of our activities are done more mindfully. There's something wonderful again about the monastic teachings on discipline, which is called wei yi or deportment, etiquette and deportment, which we don't have time to get into today. But in general, there are what's called the 4大威仪, which are the four major aspects of deportment, which are sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. And how do we have good deportment? Well, the principle, again, is just mindfulness of what we're doing all the time. But if we emphasize our posture, if we emphasize that when we stand, we know that we should stand with good posture. For lay people, we're not wearing robes, so we don't have all these specific postures that monastics have when they're wearing robes. There's uh, hand positions that you have when you're wearing long robes. Otherwise, the robes will be dragging on the floor. For us, we don't have any special clothing that needs that. But when we stand, we can remind ourselves to be mindful. Am I standing with good posture? Am I also relaxed? And sitting, when we sit at our desks, are we sitting with good posture? For myself, I actually bought this platform so I can sit at the desk with my legs crossed. You can't, I don't think you could see it now, but my legs are crossed and I'm sitting on a meditation cushion. And it's this platform, which is actually, I couldn't find anything for sitting, for putting a meditation cushion on, but I got what's it called? Just like a tea table for an outdoors furniture set. The tea table was the perfect size to put the square cushion and the round cushion on top of it. So I have this tea table, my meditation cushion, and I can sit at my desk with very upright and relaxed posture. I don't need to lean on anything. And I could sit this way for hours and feel comfortable. Although I try to take breaks every hour and a half. But good posture at our desk can not only save us from physical discomfort, it can also help us to establish mindfulness all the while we're at our desk. And what's interesting is that if we intentionally set up our posture when we sit, this discipline of sitting with good posture is the foundation for mental calm and wisdom. And why is that? Well, just think about it. When we sit upright, that allows us to relax completely. When we're completely relaxed, or at least very relaxed, when we start to become tense, we can notice it much more quickly. If we're sitting in a way which is hunched and tense to begin with, if we get more tense, we're probably not going to recognize it. But if we start with this baseline of very relaxed and upright posture, if we're typing away on our computer, or if we're having a meeting online, um, if you're at the office, if you're at the office, I guess you can't cross your legs and sit on a meditation cushion, but you can still practice sitting in a meeting upright if the chair allows for it. Maybe the chair doesn't allow for it, so you have to sit back, but okay. But if we're sitting in a way that's fully relaxed to begin with, as soon as we become tense, as soon as we become triggered or bothered by something, and our emotions start to churn, our thoughts start to churn, if we can notice the physical tension first, then we have the opportunity to adjust our mind, to adjust the way we're thinking, the way we're reacting. If we don't have a foundation of posture and relaxation, we're likely not going to have concentration or stability or wisdom. So I think this is a really concrete example of how discipline is the foundation for concentration and wisdom. And that if we apply this to daily life situations, we can establish a foundation through all of our daily life activities, sitting, standing, walking, and even lying down. Um, so this is the more finer point of discipline in daily life, which is being mindful throughout these various activities. I wish I had more time to talk about um, the posture of lying down, but If you attend retreat, you'll be able to learn that at a Dharma drum retreat, or just to go online and look at different postures for how to lie down when we sleep. And you'll find that with starting with good posture when we sleep can greatly improve the quality of our sleep, which then will improve the quality of our energy the next day, which again is the foundation for mental stability and emotional calm, as well as wisdom. So we really can't ignore discipline. If we ignore discipline, then we end up causing instability, causing ourselves to be emotionally unstable, and we're not going to be able to develop wisdom with that disturbed, agitated mind and body. So I shared a bit about the practice of discipline for lay practitioners in daily life. If you are interested in retreat practice, I highly recommend doing a retreat, meditation retreat, whether it's 1 day, 3 days, or 7 days or longer. A meditation retreat has the structure of discipline in a way that we just can't match in daily life. Retreat life is such a simplified way of living and takes care of these basics of sleep, diet, activity, rest, in a way which is really almost impossible to experience in daily life unless you have the luxury of being retired and you have all this time for just a personal retreat at home. But then again, I would challenge that and say, how many of us, even if we're either retired or we have all this vacation time, how many of us are really going to be diligent if we're by ourselves at home? Are we really going to spend all our time on being mindful, concentrating, understanding the Dharma? Or will we get tempted by our phones, devices, phone calls, and all sorts of things? So retreat practice is so precious because the structure is created for us. We're doing meditation a lot, so that's the concentration practice is being developed. We're hearing the Dharma, so the wisdom is being developed. We have an even clearer direction on how to practice. During retreat, it's a rare time to have these three practices of disciplines, concentration, and wisdom very well taken care of. And then after retreat, you may have better ideas of how to implement some of these practices into daily life. Or at least because of the benefit of retreat, where we really have a chance to develop a healthy, disciplined, stable, clear body and mind. After that, when we go back to daily life, we'll likely want to make adjustments so that our life is not so exhausting, so that we're not burning ourselves out because of a lack of discipline. We're not burning ourselves out because even when we're tired, we're still just staying up to watch some show or do something else. After we taste a life of discipline on retreat, when we go back to daily life, we'll want to live that discipline. We'll experience a kind of freedom from living in a disciplined and structured way. At first, it may seem like there's more restriction because, oh, I have all these guidelines now. I have the five precepts, I have the Bodhisattva precepts, I even have these personal precepts. It may seem like a chore to have all these guidelines. But once we get accustomed to them, they become the thing that sets us free. These guidelines or structured way of living sets us free from all the habits that cause us trouble. Discipline sets us free from the craving that we get stuck in, from the anger that we get wrapped up in, and from just the mental scatteredness and confusion that we experience because of a lack of discipline. So this is what the title of this talk means, where discipline really sets us free, frees us from suffering. Whatever discipline we can adhere to, it frees us from the suffering and the attachments of not being disciplined. It frees us from the problems of those habits. So you're all welcome to retreat. There are, for those of you who live in New York, the Dharma Drum Retreat Center has lots of retreats going on upstate. And I will be leading a retreat in June, so next month. It's, I believe, the middle of the month. You can take a look at the Dharma Drum website. If you're interested in practicing together with me, it's a weekend retreat. And then there are some longer retreats coming up after that. If you have more experience and you're interested in doing a 7-day or a 10-day meditation retreat. So I'll conclude the talk here. Oh, I see Warren has put that in the link, the retreat center. I'll conclude the talk here, and now we have some time for interaction, some Q&A.